Alright, this is my project on the economics of nonprofits, which you can probably tell by this nifty title I have up here. While charities have, for the most part, been looked upon as relatively beneficial institutions for much of history, there have indeed been some naysayers to their existence. According to Reinhold Neubauer, an American scholar from the mid-20th century, philanthropy always compounds the display of power with the expression of pity. That statement might not always hold true, but to fully understand why it may or may not be true, we have to first investigate how a nonprofit functions economically. But what is a nonprofit, you might ask? Well, I'm here to give you the basic rundown of how one operates and why they may not be quite as altruistic as you think they are, because they really aren't. First, there are some general terms you should be familiar with, most important of which is overhead. Overhead is the part of an organization's budget, in this case a charitable organization's budget, that is required to adequately manage it. It's essentially the bare minimum that accounts for a program's general upkeep. And overhead is subdivided into two main categories, as explained by the Internal Revenue Service's, or IRS's, succinct, extremely interesting, and not at all dry or dull Form 990, which every nonprofit has to fill out when filing for non-taxation nonprofit status. The two subcategories of overhead that I was talking about before the Form 990s are actually fundraising and administrative costs. Fundraising costs are pretty easy to pin down when checking to see if a nonprofit's being truthful about them, or at least they should be. You should be able to just check how much a nonprofit spends on fundraising annually, see how much advertising or events cost. But some nonprofits find ways around this inconsequential notion of, being honest and telling the truth. So the definition of fundraising gets stretched a little bit. Take, for example, the Kids Wish Network. After doing some research on them because it seemed like they weren't giving the majority of their donations to sick children like they were supposed to, it was revealed in 2012 that nearly all their reported fundraising costs go toward paying corporate lawyers, presumably to get them out of trouble for performing illicit activities, such as fudging their tax forms. It turns out that the Kids Wish Network only paid 3 cents out of every dollar donated to their purported cause of fulfilling the wishes of terminally ill children. And while overhead usually takes up roughly 50% of an average charitable nonprofit's budget, in this case it was taking up 97%, which is pretty ridiculous. But not all of it was going into the fake fundraising costs that just paid corporate lawyers. High administrative costs factor into the overhead as well. In fact, the woman who created the Kids Wish Network, Shelley Briner, earns roughly $5 million a year, which in terms of running a nonprofit is a fairly hefty sum. Now, the Kids Wish Network is certainly not the only charitable organization who does this, taking over 90% of nonprofit donations to serve as overhead. Organizations like the Cancer Fund of America, the Children's Wish Foundation International, and even the Firefighters Charitable Foundation, just to name a few, all annually spend less than 10% of their donations on direct cash aid to their causes. But, that being said, these large-scale nonprofit organizations are, for the most part, outliers. Unlike smaller charitable nonprofits, they're able to hide the channels through which they direct donations, which is kind of bad for the people donating. They really should be able to actually know that their money is going towards a cause that they support, not just a supervisor's wallet. While there do exist charities out there who will essentially just take your money and run all in the name of a good cause, the majority of charities just take what they need to stay afloat and put the money where it should actually go, to whatever cause needs a helping hand. So, if you ever happen to stumble upon a charity that sets up its executives in giant, cushy offices, it might be a good idea to do some further research and direct your donations elsewhere. And those are the basic economics of nonprofits. Hope you enjoyed them.
Created using Powtoon.